Good morning, everyone, and happy Thursday. I'm hoping this is working here. I'm on the road here today for the rest of the week. I'm hoping you guys can hear me. You can see the screen. And then we should be ready to dial in here in just a second. Quickly making sure I get the chat function up here. You guys all hear me okay? And you can see the screen? Just quickly double checking before we get started. Okay, very good. Very good. Cool. All right, let's get started, everybody. Again, happy Thursday. It's May 29th. It's our last session here for Set the Market for the month of May. We're going to be back here on Monday. It'll be June 2nd. Felt like a bit of a holiday shortened week. I mean, obviously is a holiday shortened week. And so, markets, however, are giving us plenty of things to analyze and probably do here as well later on today. If you're here for the first time, this is our Set the Market morning call. Serge Berger here from thestudytrio.com on the road today and tomorrow, hence the very different backdrop here for today. If you haven't done so yet, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and you give us a thumbs up like that. Allows us to be able to continue to do this morning show. It's really important so the algos pick it up, and more importantly to you, it allows you to be updated in real time when we go live with our analysis. So please do that, and let's get started and knock this out in the next 10, 15 minutes. So what's going on? First of all, just quickly from a performance perspective, and I've got some really interesting update here by the way, what's happening so far today. If you look at the performance chart of things, right, you still see European equities up, leading the charge, but you're starting to see some materials, and we've talked about the materials bull case for some time. Uranium, copper up a close second, and emerging markets, silver, Chinese equities, and growthier things like the cybersecurity stocks. We talked about shares of CrowdStrike the other day to our members on Tuesday. And on the underperformance side, we most notably have underperformance in the equity space. The S&P essentially flat for the year, up obviously here this morning, so I'm going to call it up 1.5% to 2% on the year now. With this morning's move so far pre-market, the NASDAQ 100 probably up about 2.5% on the year, but again lagging everything else. Now that does not mean it can't play catch up. However, that's become the base case and the narrative out there. I tend to fade the base case that everyone has, although not disrespecting it, but understanding that it might be a touch stretched. So that's to keep. I've got a bit of a hay fever, so hence the little sniffles here. So apologies for that. All right. So let's talk about so far today, and let's talk about NVIDIA, which we would be silly to ignore. So far today, here is how things are working and looking. I do want to quickly point out the S&P 500. So this here is I'm going to make it larger for you so you can all see this. This is the overnight price action so far today. This is a 5-minute chart. The entire overnight price action is the gray zone. That's the S&P 500. If you notice something, you can see that the SPY, and this is the SPY ETF, it came within like 1.7 points of 600. So S&P 500 itself about 6,000. Now, does that mean that was it and we're going to tumble lower from here? It's not that easy. We may well go above 6,000, right? That's entirely possible. But I do want you to know that that is a reference point now. So for those of you that are involved here intraday, we're going to switch over to trade ops in about 20 minutes and start looking at some intraday opportunity as well. That's a line in the sand. So if we were to get a rally this morning, we need to make sure that if that wants to continue it is able to overcome that 600 area, the overnight high, or again, S&P 500 6,000 level, which is SPY 600. So very important. Now, that's the SPY. Obviously, the stock we need to watch today is NVIDIA. So let's talk a little bit about NVIDIA because, that is in reality what the algos are going to focus on. NVIDIA so far overnight hasn't really given up much of its gains. The stock is still up about, and let's call that 5% or so. So this will be the stock that I'll be watching here. Needless to say, kind of obvious, that's going to be the one that to me dictates what the market's going to do. This gets us back to the point that we've been making all year, which is that we think that the S&P 500 is even if it now has a chance to make all-time highs, it likely won't last. And so it's very important to understand the dynamics here. So even if one is bullish here and the S&P makes another few percent move, and breaks out of this bull flag, it just doesn't have that much upside through a multi-quarter lens. On a multi-week basis, yes, we can break higher. On a multi-month basis, we can break higher. The question is, what are we going to do, through a multi-quarter lens? Where are we at the end of the year? And what's the S&P going to do for the next number of years? Most people, in my view, in our strong view, are going to dramatically underperform and make maybe only 5% per year if they're basically long U.S. large cap stocks. That's basically the S&P 500. Doesn't feel like it right now, although it should, because the S&P is already lagging most other things. But NVIDIA is important because NVIDIA is the stock right now that is at the epicenter not only of the AI, but also of the allocation. So if you are a large global asset allocator, be that a pension fund, an insurance company, a sovereign fund, right? Some of the largest asset allocators are global, be that Saudis, the Saudi investment allocation fund, as the sovereign fund, be it Norway, be it giant, domestic or international insurance companies. A lot of these guys are reallocating capital and they are diversifying. And they are diversifying away from being dramatically overweight the things like NVIDIA. Not because these are bad companies. They are not bad companies. They are great companies. In fact, NVIDIA's margins were tremendous. If you look at the report, and I looked at it last night, I mean, it was a really impressive report. But the reality remains that the NASDAQ is probably kind of range bound because NVIDIA is range bound. And NVIDIA is range bound. If you look at it, NVIDIA, even with this morning's rally, hasn't done anything in like 11 months. Or now maybe, about 11 months. So we need to just understand that if we're getting bullish up here, that is the V-shaped reversal back to all-time highs kind of thing. That is likely not going to last. And I keep mentioning this every morning. I think the NASDAQ could go to fresh all-time highs. The question is how long does it last? And this is really, if you listen to what I'm actually saying here for the past 10 minutes or so, then that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that, yes, the NASDAQ could go back to all-time highs, but the question is, are we going to wake up one morning and it's going to be down 3% and that'll be it, right? So if you're still hoping and praying for NASDAQ to V-shape reversal back to all-time highs, which has happened for 10, 15 years, I think that's just a really bad strategy to have here because we don't have to do that. There's so many things that are acting so much better than these 10 or 7 stocks. And again, I'm not making this up. This is factual. That's why I started the morning call before with the chart that I just showed you below, which is that global assets are outperforming the MAX 7 stocks, right? MAX 7, as measured by the NASDAQ 100, are some of the worst performances here. They're not like outright negative, although they were down 20%. But they're being beaten by so many other things. Now they can play some catch up, but I think the volatility risk is worse than it is in other parts of the market. So again, that's not, we don't want to be outright negative or bearish Nasdaq 100, but we want to be very mindful that I can see by the questions being asked here that that is still the mindset that many people have. It doesn't help that major strategists are going out there in Bloomberg and CNBC spewing that same narrative because they have a very simple playbook. If you're some of those major talking heads on CNBC, it's very simple. You have a statistic. The statistic says the S&P typically corrects 10% and makes 9% a year. Now, if you're wrong, you're not going to be that wrong in terms of S&P terms, but most people won't be able to stay through all that. So they get out of the worst possible time. The strategist doesn't care because he can just say, oh, it's just you just keep playing the game and hold and stay invested. That's not how most people actually play the game because they end up getting stopped out or can't take the pain. So if your favorite talking head on CNBC is telling you that it's back to all-time highs and then it's going to continue going, understand the game they're playing. They're not risk managing. I know very few people that are private investors that have done any risk management over the past month. They should have. They were just lucky, basically, that we had another V-shaped reversal. Now, we're not at all-time highs yet, and it probably won't continue for an extended period of time. We can certainly go to all-time highs. The question is, how long does it stay, and does it then continue? That's typically where I think we're going to have a lot more problems for people's mindset. Now, that's NVIDIA. So watch NVIDIA very closely. We will be watching NVIDIA very closely. The other thing that we need to look at here today is what's going on in the over in Germany. And you may not care about those stocks, but it is actually important to note that German stocks this morning are actually, if you look at the price action, are actually now negative on the day. And the algos are very correlated between Europe and the US. So, if it's risk on, then they're going to buy stocks in both sides of the pond. I think the fact that at some point this morning the DAX was up as much as 1.25%. Now it's down on the day, or at least marginally down. It's something worth watching. It doesn't bear, getting outright bearish and selling every single penny, but it's a risk management exercise, I think, that I would pay attention to here right now. What is interesting that's holding up once again very well, although it is a very frustrating trade, is silver. It's holding up rather well. Gold's acting better again. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. If there's one thing that I'm watching today, it's going to be NVIDIA. As much as I dislike to say that, it is important to watch at this point. So if NVIDIA turns tail and from being up 5% ends up really wanting to fill that gap, that's a big if, and we'll be watching it very closely over in trade ops starting in about 15 minutes. That to me would then mean that the S&P has peaked for the time being, and maybe would fall into a consolidation period. Again, we're not there yet. We don't know. We'll find out more in the next few hours. The S&P 500, by the way, this morning when it reached 600, or the SPY, essentially once again so far failed to break out of this range, meaning out of the bull flag. But it could do that. So we need to be very mindful of that. So when you get the commercials, all you have to do is hit skip. It doesn't actually miss. You're not going to miss anything on the live feed. It just pauses your thing, and we actually stopped the ads, so I'm not quite sure why they're still there. But we'll see what we can do about that. So just so you know, this is our all free information. So I do think we reserve the right to get paid a couple of pennies on all this free information, since you're watching this on YouTube. Just as an FYI, that's how the world works. So anyway, I wish you guys all a great weekend. If you're a member, I'll see you over in Trade Ops, and have a great day. Again, watch NVIDIA today. It is an important stock to watch, and we'll see you back here Monday with Set the Market Live again, and again over in Trade Ops in the next few minutes. Take care.